Thanks, Sam. The session that we're about to start belongs to those who are already on the front lines, presenting experts within our community relations field who will share with you some of their best practice strategies, some of those strategies that Sam was talking about that we want to make sure are shared and replicated. We're going to hear this morning about 5 examples of programs and initiatives from various communities around the country: Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Rochester, and nationally from JFNA's FedLab. Each of these programs was developed to respond to growing hate and division in America and anti-Semitism. Following these presentations, we're going to ask to hear from you. At your tables, guided by a pre-assigned moderator, we're going to ask you to share your thoughts and strategies. More specifics on those discussions later. For now, please join me in welcoming a truly outstanding panel. I'm pleased to introduce, and hold your applause till the end, please, Stephanie Hausner, Deputy Director, Israel Action Network, a joint project between Jewish Federations of North America and JCPA. Lindsey Mintz, JCRC Executive Director, Indianapolis. Elana Kahn, Director of the JCRC Council of Milwaukee Jewish Federation. Jackie Congedo, Director of the JCRC Jewish Federation of Cincinnati, and Karen Elam, Director of the Levine Center to End Hate and the Director of the Community Relations for the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester.
Okay. Well, first, I'd just like to say that I'm really happy to be on an all-female panel, but I think we're having a little technical difficulty. Okay, FedLab. So this year, the Jewish Federations of North America attempted to do something different. We've had a GA for, I have really no idea how many years, but a very long time. And this year we decided to do something called FedLab, where we brought 900 people from the federation system and outside experts on a variety of topics in to participate in a design thinking lab. We had 260 participants in our Jewish Security and Empowerment session, which I'll get to in a second. But I wanted to spend 1 minute on the plenary itself. So there was a plenary. Okay. See, it's good that I'm going first because we'll figure it out by the time everyone else goes. Okay. Hopefully you could see that or not. Okay, so there was a plenary the first day for the entire 900 people that came, and there was a question asked, how do we fight anti-Semitism? And so people took out their cell phones and had to answer, how do we fight anti-Semitism? And the number one thing, by a very large number, as you can see, I think 79%, was stronger community relations. And I remember hearing like whispers around the room from some of you in this room right now saying, yeah, we know, like that's what we've been doing for so long. And that was in the total plenary session. Now, going back to the Jewish Security and Empowerment track, it originally started out as called like the anti-agenda, and it was supposed to be how do we fight anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism and security. And we talked about it, and we decided we didn't want to be the anti-track, right? It's not about being against something. It's about being for something. And so we wanted to talk about what is Jewish security. And we spent some time as a group in our planning committee, which was comprised of IAN and SCAN professionals, talking about what does it mean to feel safe and secure as a Jew, and that's how we started our conversation around Jewish security. Some of the objectives of the program were to understand the evolving landscape of threats, deepen our understanding of human components of security. We didn't want to just focus on the brick and mortar. We didn't want to just focus on security plans. We wanted to talk about what does it mean for us to feel safe, build new connections, identify big questions, and it would all be done through this process, which is a design thinking process. We discovered as part of our discovery process, we had 10 communities. Many of you actually are in this room right now, and most of you are on this stage, and I know Carolyn and Melanie and a few others in the audience talk about some of the best practices of their programs, because we felt like it was really important that the participants in the program, some of which are doing this work on a daily basis, some of which this is the first time they're engaging in this deep level conversation, hear about some of the great things we have going on in federations across the country. Then we defined what our problem statements are. What is it that we want to work on? And participants explored, there were 24 groups, pre-assigned groups, with a diverse range of people in each group. So we mixed up professionals and lay leaders and people who were in the federation system and people from outside organizations. We had a couple of college students, and we wanted to have the most diverse tables as possible. In most cases that worked, sometimes it didn't. But these groups came up with a variety of plans, and I just want to kind of list the different topical areas. So we had 6 groups explore community, and they had to basically say, what does it mean to feel safe? And these were the areas in which they picked. 6 groups picked community relations and interfaith bridge building. 5 picked security awareness. 4, engaging diverse and unaffiliated Jews. 3, political and civic engagement and advocacy. Another 3, parents, teams, and families, and 3, college campuses. And so within those spheres, they explored and built what potential programs could exist. And many of them are programs that are happening in some of our communities already, and some of them aren't, and some of them were quite innovative, but most of them were in the realm of community relations and interfaith relations. So what are our next steps? And I only have 5 minutes, so I'm trying to be very quick. Our next steps are expand security operations. So we at JFNA are about to launch a large-scale security initiative. And the idea is that every Jewish community in this country will have a regional security person, whether it's in their federation or it's close by, and they'll be working with the community, both small and large, and also to expand our funding for security apparatus. So we went from $60 million last year in nonprofit security grants to $90 million this year, and now we're pushing for $360 million, which Senator Schumer announced right after the Mintz attacks. We also will be working to get scanned security assessments to different communities, small and large, a government relations aspect, community relations. One of the things we're working on that I think will impact many of you is how do we increase state security funding and other statewide advocacy, and that's a priority for JFNA in the year ahead, and obviously enhancing our work in community relations. Thank you.
Oh, it's right. All right, this is going to be interesting to see what PowerPoint actually shows up here. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lindsey Mintz, and I'm the Executive Director of the JCRC in Indianapolis. I'm really honored to share our experience in building a statewide coalition and lobbying to pass a bias crimes bill, and to specifically link that to how advocacy work can help fight anti-Semitism. So in 2014, Indiana was still one of only 5 states that did not have a bias crimes law on the books. We knew it was time for this to change. The Indianapolis Jewish community hadn't had a full community conversation about this in 15 years. Before we could commit to the massive undertaking, we first had to educate within the community and build consensus within the Jewish community. Our deliberative process lasted close to a year, and it got us in a position where we could craft our language, take a vote around the JCRC's communal table, and in late 2014, we took a position endorsing the passage of a fully inclusive bias crimes bill and committing to lead the statewide effort. Indiana policymakers hadn't been forced to have a conversation for over 15 years. So lots and lots and lots of meetings with legislators to get traction. And out in the community at large, we started having panels and forums. So in 2016, we started in earnest to build the coalition. We identified and reached out to leaders in various constituencies: Black community, Latinx, LGBTQ, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, as well as the law enforcement community, the prosecutor's office, and other law enforcement agencies. We listened. We sought partnerships and made connections, serving as the bridge among communities. In 2016, we had about 5 organizations. We got a surprise hearing in our Senate, passed through the Senate. We thought, wow, this is going to be great, only to die in our House when the religious right, which was busy dealing with RFRA, if anybody remembers the RFRA drama that was going on that year in Indiana, and managed to stop the bill moving in the House. In 2017, we had 15 in our coalition. 2018, we really started building. So that by 2019, we had a nonprofit and for-profit partnership with over 700 organizations signed on, organizations like Lilly, Cummins, Salesforce. By the time we entered the General Assembly, we were well organized with marketing statewide. Doing the work of community relations and building the coalition is one thing. Keeping the coalition together is another. One of our constant concerns, one of the themes was a concern about whether the coalition would sort of cave on removing language that included gender identity in the list of protected classes. So while there was never any wavering from advocates or the business community, there was a consistent sort of strain on the coalition. This case study isn't just about our advocacy to pass bias crimes. We also need to take a moment to consider the context. What was the backdrop across Indiana? We all know 2016, 17, 18, there was a steady increase in incidents of anti-Semitism. Here's just a quick look at some of the things that unfolded in Indiana. So Nazi graffiti, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism on campus. These are all campuses within a couple hours or in Indianapolis. And then in Indianapolis, a suburb of Indianapolis, Congregation Shari Tefillah, this was the summer of 2018. Within 36 hours, we had 1,500 people inside the synagogue, and a line of people, our partners that we'd been building for many years, but particularly around hate crimes, all lined up to stand up in support of the Jewish community. Recognized that while this showed the strength of the coalition, it also exposed a potential crack too, because it was the vandalism of a synagogue in a suburban community that inspired our Republican governor to come out in support of hate crimes. So we had some work to do with our partners in the Black community to talk through and acknowledge and lift up the difficulty of that moment. In 2018, we also launched some proactive programming. I would love to spend another 5 minutes talking about that, but I'm going to move on and conclude and say that in 2019, we did pass a bias crimes law. It was a lot, it fell very short of what we wanted. This is another part of coalition building. Keeping the coalition together, accepting a step forward, not everything we wanted, but all of these things. Every time we had a conversation around hate crimes, gave an interview, we're on TV, radio, in a conversation with a legislator across the board, we're talking about how the Jewish community feels, the increase in anti-Semitism, and raising awareness really considerably through these efforts. I think that will do it for me. Thank you so much.
I'm doing this with an iPad, so I have a a little bit of a, I feel younger than I am. I'm Elana Kahn, the director of the Jewish Community Relations Council in Milwaukee. And the title of this session should be, or my part, Data is Sexy. So anybody recognize this photo? I hate to re-traumatize anyone with it. This was from Baraboo High School in 2018, prom. This was part of the prom photos. And it was taken in the spring at prom, and then 6 months later, somebody discovered it and tweeted it, and it went viral. And so we did what other CRCs do. We reached out to Baraboo's in central Wisconsin. It's 2.5 hours from Milwaukee, where we are, but we covered the rest of the state in some way. We reached out. We had a statement that we had partners sign. We reached out to the school. We spoke to the administrators. We offered help. We went to Baraboo, and we shared with them a variety of resources: ADL curricula, speakers, our Holocaust Education Resource Center, visits to our museum. But the most powerful and resonant and easy-to-use practical tool, one that they used year after year, the only program that they repeated in their Day of Unity, was Hours Against Hate. That's a teaser because we have a table in the exhibit hall. So I'm not going to talk about Hours Against Hate, but I do want to share that information with you. Hours Against Hate is a program that was started in the State Department, and we launched it in 2013 in Milwaukee, and it's an effort to build empathy across lines of difference. So come and learn more about that. We went to Baraboo in the fall. They had a Day of Unity, and we brought Hours Against Hate for discussion between the students, and they loved it so much, like I said, they brought it back the second year. So this is this year. At the end of the year, what we did, however, and we continue to engage the school, is we included the incident in our audit. So this is not a new program, but we create an audit every year of anti-Semitic incidents, and it is a long, large process that includes lots of people. We release it in the beginning part of the next year, so we are now in process of preparing the audit. It takes months, actually, of the 2019 audit. Why do we do it, and what's the value? So this is our press release, quite a visual. We do it because we do it every year. It provides us consistent data that we can compare from year to year, and we keep it confidential. Those are important features. We share it with the local Jewish community, which helps increase reporting, increase education. We send it to law enforcement so that they know what's happening in our community. With them, we share where all of the incidents took place. And it helps improve our relationships with them. We send to local organizations and individuals, elected officials. We always get responses. I always get emails back, notes of empathy, et cetera. And it helps us build alliances and understanding among different groups. We send to local media. We want people to know what's happening in our community. We want people to know what it's like to be Jewish. And we send to national organizations like Southern Poverty Law Center, Anti-Defamation League, et cetera, to improve their data. It gives us, as I said, local data that allows us to compare the number of incidents. So we are pointing out now, and as I talk about anti-Semitism, that we have, since 2015, an increase of 349% in incidents. And we can show the data. We don't have 2019 because it's not finished. We can track there we go, we can track it. We also, we divide incidents, we categorize them by expression, vandalism, swastika harassment, and threats. And we see that there is a drastic increase in the number of incidents involving harassment and threats. And that's important to know. It gives us data that allows us to direct community programming, direct funds even. We know that from our data that a huge number of incidents take place among young people. So that means that we need to prepare, not only have programs that educate students, but we need to have programs to educate our own children to know how to talk about it. And we have the data then that backs that up. We know that a huge percentage of incidents take place online, so we need to think about that. It also helps us have, we have a huge process that includes task force, the board, and then we have a community council. So we have a lot of lay people who are ambassadors and champions and thought partners in what is and isn't anti-Semitism, because not every awful thing is anti-Semitism. We get media coverage every year, which is important for us to frame the messages as we want them, to create alliances, to make sure that when we're talking about bigotry in our community, people understand that a community that allows anti-Semitism also allows bigotry against people based on other identity factors, race, religion, LGBT, etc. So it's an opportunity to educate our community, raise awareness, position ourselves as experts. I wanted to cover this whole screen with pictures of me, but never mind. I'm just teasing. And it also allows us to empower and educate allies. So this is interesting because it's a photo at German Fest in Milwaukee. We are the city of festivals, in case anybody wants a great summer trip, come to Milwaukee. There are festivals all year. There's also a big red sign in front of me that says stop. I think it's maybe a hate crime. So there was a woman walking at German Fest who saw this man holding this flag, which is a Stahlhelm flag. And she said, that looks funny. And she's not Jewish, and she contacted her friend who happens to work with us and said, is this wrong? And her friend looked it up and said, yes, it is wrong. This is used by neo-Nazis. And so she then reported him to security. Security asked the man to put the flag away. He refused, and they kicked him out of the festival. And this is because we are educating our community, increasing awareness. So I will end there. I think that's the end. But I'm happy to share any documents about our guidelines or the audit itself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jackie Congedo. I'm the director of the JCRC in Cincinnati, part of the Jewish Federation there. And I also, just because I don't know that it got enough play when Stephanie said it, but so humbled to be up here with these amazing women who are leading this work. And I'm going to jump right in because we only have a few minutes. And I want to start with this picture. So this is what got us sort of thinking differently about the way we educate and engage in terms of our community relations efforts on anti-Semitism. This is obviously from Charlottesville. And what happened is we started to realize that there were different narratives happening in the Jewish community and then in the broader community about what took place in Charlottesville. So in the Jewish community, many of you are familiar with this sort of panic and outrage at the level of anti-Semitism and sort of anti-Semitic rhetoric, anti-Semitic insignia associated with this event. I'm sure many of you can relate that in the broader community, we were hearing something a little bit different. And it wasn't, I don't think, malicious. It was from our allies who were saying, why were they talking about Jews in Charlottesville? Were they really saying Jews will not replace us? Was that you will not replace us? I thought this was about Confederate monuments. What does that have to do with Jews? I thought Jews are white. All of these kinds of things. And really what we realized is that that is anecdotal evidence of a problem that's been statistically measured, which is that while a majority of Americans understand that hate is on the rise, actually only about a third of Americans report that anti-Semitism is on the rise. And we know those numbers are maybe a year or so old. Certainly they've come up a little bit, unfortunately, with the horrific violent attacks that we've seen in the last year and a half. But we know that there's a discrepancy still. And so what does this mean? This means that we're really faced with a compounded threat. A dramatic rise in anti-Semitism without sufficient public awareness of the problem to motivate broad interest in combating it. So what I like to the analogy I use here is the only thing worse than having your house on fire is no one seeing the flames coming out of your house, right? Nobody is going to come with water and help to put the flames out if people don't recognize that there's a problem. So in the wake of Charlottesville, when I started to realize there was this discrepancy, I actually reached out to David, and I said, help us figure out how to educate about this. And he said, you need to talk to Eric Ward, who's standing right here. And I'm so glad all of you got to hear from Eric this morning. So we reached out to Eric, and we brought Eric to Cincinnati, and I was just captivated by the way he could talk about this with different audiences, and the way he could reach people that I could never reach on this topic, the way he could reach them in a self-interest way and say, it's not about being good friends to the Jewish community, it's about what's in it for you in this fight. So that became our sort of grounding rally call, and our new strategy was to really build more Erics. We need more people who can speak and in diverse ways and among diverse communities and have diverse credibility to be able to carry this education, and also specifically to help instill a self-interest in this work. I like to say we need more ally translators, people who can speak with credibility and resonance across diverse constituencies. And we need to build them in our communities. We need to empower these people in our communities. We have them because we've been doing this amazing community relations work for so many years, where we've been to each other's vigils and we've developed strong friendships and allyships and relationships. But do we really have the deep work that we need to do in order to inspire this kind of force multiplication and these ambassadors to go out and really understand what's in it for them and communicate that? So our test case for this was we hosted a summit in April. Eric also came back to help us headline that. We put this together very quickly after Pittsburgh. We had a lot of people reach out and say, what can we do to help? And we said, you can be an ally partner on our summit. We had 40 different organizations in the broader community partnered to build this with us. You can see some of them here, but they're very diverse. We sold out 3 weeks early. We had 153 organizations represented among 350 people. These are all influencers. I'm talking leaders of universities, corporate DEI leads, police, community activists, nonprofit, clergy. 61% of the people who attended were not Jewish, and most of them I didn't know. So our allies brought their networks, and we had a really diverse participation ranging from far left to far right. We knew it was going to be a challenge to talk to everybody in ways that made sense to them. But what we found was that it was really resonant, and I'm not going to go through each number because I know we're almost out of time, but you can see that overwhelmingly people reported they had a stronger understanding of anti-Semitism, of the way anti-Semitism intersects with other forms of hatred, of why it's important for them to be invested in this. They made new connections and that would be useful in the future of their work. And also empirically, I think what happened was our JCRC started to really become centered as the brand, not just for combating anti-Semitism, but really we became the go-to in the community for resources to combat hate, which we feel is a very strategic position. And I know Karen's going to talk more about the work she's doing in Rochester on that. We did some time thinking about what made this effective. And rather than go through everything, I'll leave them up here for you to look at. But basically, we were very intentional about this balance between anti-Semitism and hatred, right? We wanted to walk a line that was important and responsible, but we also wanted to own our space in that we are tasked with educating about anti-Semitism. We weren't going to shy away from that. We used our ally voices and our ally presenters who came in from out of town to help us walk that line. And we, again, created space for people to connect. We addressed the left and the right. And empirically what happened was the Jewish community felt heard. These are, leaders in our community who for the first time I think really felt, thank you for telling our story responsibly. There are so many people trying to sort of hijack what is anti-Semitism and the Jewish opinion or narrative on something. And I think our community felt like, thank you for responsibly sharing what this is in the moment for us. And then lastly, I'll just share that I really think that we hit on something unique about Israel specifically. You can reach different people when you talk about Israel through the lens of anti-Semitism. And that's what we did. We did it at the end of the day, and I felt that we were able to actually talk to a new group of people about issues with Israel. So again, now what we're doing, and this really is the last thing I'll say, is we're leading into a sort of a expanded program where we're going to bring together 15 to 25 civic leaders, mostly non-Jews, across the city. These are influencers in all of their different spaces to really develop a cohort, not only on the content of what we tried to address at the summit, the intersections of hatred, but more specifically, and this goes back to what Eric was saying so eloquently about democracy, that we know we can't necessarily end anti-Semitism, but what we can do is we can work to address the weaknesses in our democracy that allow for an environment where anti-Semitism can become more rooted in the center and more deadly. And so we're going to equip these leaders with the tools they need to be better ambassadors of democracy. And then we're going to send them out into the community and co-create programming so they can be force multipliers in the community with us, in their own communities, with their own voices and their own credibility. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna do my utmost to stay to the 5 minutes so that Melanie doesn't have a heart attack. It's all good. So I'm not sure why that's scrolling, but maybe we could go back to the first slide. Okay, I'm done. My name is Karen Elam. I'm director of the Levine Center to End Hate, and I'm the JCRC director in Rochester, New York at the Federation. And can we get back to the very first slide? So first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody on this panel. Not only was I furiously taking notes about things I want to talk to all of you about, but I also want to specifically say thank you to Jackie for teeing up my presentation. That first photo that was up there was exactly the impetus for the creation of the Levine Center to End Hate, what happened in Charlottesville, which I just have to say as a sidebar is my and my husband's alma mater, so it felt particularly painful to get the phone call while I was in Israel on a trip with a group of teens from Modi'in and from Rochester, and to be contacted by my husband to say that neo-Nazis were marching on our campus. So the other thing I want to say to Jackie, and I've said it more than once, I attended your excellent summit in April of 2019, and we are going to be modeling our own very soon, so you'll hear from me. And last quick thing I'll say is that I've been trying to court Eric Ward ever since then, and Eric keeps avoiding me. So one of these days, business is brisk for him. He's very popular, but I'm really hoping to get him to come to Rochester, and not in the winter, don't worry. So I can try to go to the next slide. There we go. So our mission, which is quite audacious, and that's what I like about it, is to unite the greater Rochester community in overcoming hate through education, dialogue, and positive action. And we were very fortunate. Local donor, the William and Mildred Levine Foundation, gave us a 4-year, $1 million grant to start this initiative. We very quickly put together a steering committee. We knew that am I being too loud? We knew that thank you, that we needed a dimensional steering committee. We wanted really to build on all the work we'd been doing over the decades with our Community Relations Council. And so we have a steering committee that represents the business community, nonprofit, public education, higher education, government, law enforcement, diverse in terms of age, gender, sexual orientation, race, religion. It's a wonderful group of people. This is a fraction of them here in this photo. And that group has really helped us create the programming that we are now involved with. We had we first decided that we needed to focus not just on the broad community and specifically adults, but also more specifically in some regards on youth. And so we set about looking into what that programming would look like. We narrowed down that we wanted it to be school-based, and we narrowed down that we wanted it to be focused at the high school level, at least as a first step. And we partnered with an organization called RISE, the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality. One of our steering committee members is Roland Williams, an NFL champion with the LA Rams. He had experience with RISE. He connected us to them, and we've been doing work. We've now trained about 30 coaches in about 17 different schools. I can tell you more about the programming if you're interested. The other thing to say is that I'm sure we're not unique. It is a community that is segregated. The city has a large African American population, Latino population living in poverty, and we also, though, are a community that has wonderful organizations that are really engaging in dialogue, conversation about structural racism, at various levels, not just in the nonprofit sector, but now the business community is beginning to really take this up. And so for us, what was really important was to not come on the scene and say that we're the new kid in town and we're going to take over some type of corner of the world, but instead that we were here to partner with organizations that are doing this great work and amplify what they're doing. In reality, I'm one person, and so it wasn't possible for me to be able to do more than that. So in addition to the youth component, I have to stop, but what we also did was create a launch event to put ourselves out there, and it's amazing how all roads lead back to somebody in this room. So Elana Kahn is very familiar with Pardeep Kalika and Arno Michaelis, Arno being a former white supremacist, and Pardeep is a member of the Sikh community and actually is now the executive director of the Interfaith Council in Milwaukee. And those two formed a relationship after Pardeep's father was killed by a white supremacist in 2012, who came out of the gang that Arno had created. This was our high-profile event. We were hoping to have 500 people. We had 800, and the buzz in the community has continued because what we asked them to do was talk about their story, but really kick off a series of community dialogues that has led to work that we are doing with various nonprofits and restorative practices, the Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence, et cetera, that are helping us to engage people in the courageous conversations that Eric was talking about. Ultimately, as this slide says, and it's on our website, and if you get a chance, have a look at the website, we're all in this together, and I think that point has been made by many here today. It is, as Deborah said, not ours to only lift up anti-Semitism. We have to lift up all the isms, and that's exactly what we're working on. I'm going to stop there. Melanie, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll be at one of the tables, but certainly find me if you have questions. I'm happy to tell you more about the program.
Wow. So we've just had 2 amazing sessions to inspire you, and now it's our opportunity to say thank you to all 5 of our panelists. Thank you very much. So in your schedule, thank you. So in your schedule, you'll notice that we were going to be discussing Hill visit priorities. A slight change on that. We're moving on to the next program. Your Hill visit priorities have been emailed to you. They should be in your inbox. And in addition to which, they will be available in a printed form at the end of the program. So that's, if you're looking for the talking points and the briefing papers, that's where they will be. Okay. So we've just had some really stimulating conversations from external partners and from network partners, and we're going to continue that this morning as we prepare for our final roadmap session. To help us frame this final experience, we're going to add in this critical element as we hear about what a few more of our national agencies are doing to combat hate and anti-Semitism. Our partners here today are each going to share with us some of their current work. I'll introduce them in a moment, and where they might want to have help from you and from your JCRCs and communities to further build out these efforts. So listen to what they're working on so that you will know how they will need your assistance. Please join me in welcoming to my left Michael Lieberman, ADL's Washington Counsel. Michael will speak first, followed by Mike Salamon, who is Michael's colleague, Director of Community Engagement and Organizing at ADL. And finally, Rob Goldberg, who is with the Jewish Federations of North America, and he's their legislative and public policy advocate. Michael.
Good morning, everybody. This is not really a manel, because it's not, and we just saw Darcy and Dorian and Jennifer and Liza rock your socks. So you know what it's like to be an advocate that's a woman. You know what it's like to be an advocate that's a man. You probably know what it's like to be an advocate that is questioning or trans. you've seen all kinds of advocates. So I took my jacket off and I rolled up my sleeves so you could kind of be inspired to go lobby, which I know is the next thing that you're going to do. So I have two framing remarks, and then I want to talk about just a couple different pieces of legislation. First, it is, I think, axiomatic to a JCPA crowd, to CRC directors and leadership, to think legislatively. Your city council, your boards of education, your police chief, your state legislature, your attorney general, your governor, your member of Congress. All of the problems of the Jewish community, all of our community relations problems do not have legislative solutions, but there are progress that we can make. When we are focused on anti-Semitism and hate, as this panel is, we know that we cannot legislate or regulate anti-Semitism out of existence, but we can make a difference. We can make our institutions more safe. We can build community, and that is a way to fight hate and fight anti-Semitism. Two, here's my second framing point. Jews are not responsible for anti-Semitism, and Jews cannot end or address anti-Semitism by ourselves. A former JCPA award winner, civil rights leader Wade Henderson maybe said this best. If you want a friend, you have to be a friend. Coalitions is the way we get things done. In Washington, in Sacramento, in Albany, across the country, coalitions is the way we get things done. They amplify our voice, they build community. A few pieces of legislation. First, there are 4,000 synagogues in America. There are hundreds of JCCs, day schools, old age homes, camps, federation buildings. We support the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. Rob Goldberg probably knows more about this program than any human in the Northern Hemisphere. You will hear from him in a minute. The ADL can help you make those cases for funds, but our synagogues cannot be, will not be armed fortresses. Institutional security does not fight anti-Semitism. Second, I worked on the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act with so many of you for 13 years, and it has really been fantastic. We celebrated the 10-year anniversary recently, but I think the Hate Crime Statistics Act is the most important federal hate crime bill. That law passed in 1991 requires the Justice Department to do an annual report on hate crimes that are reported to them by the 18,000 police departments across the country, police departments in every one of your cities. Last year's report, about 7,000 hate crimes, but 85 cities, over 100,000 in population, either did not report any hate crimes to the FBI, any data at all, or they affirmatively called up the FBI and said, we had 0 hate crimes in 2018. That is not credible data. Those 85 cities are on our website. If you are in or near one of those cities, we should do more. And you are lobbying on the No Hate Act, which is a federal bill that will provide incentives for better reporting. But you should look at your state hate crime law. Again, a map on the ADL website has every hate crime law, every component part of every hate crime law, and see whether your law requires data collection. And if it doesn't, you should work on requiring data collection. Law enforcement is your ally, the African American community, the LGBT community, the Muslim community on these issues. That is something we should be able to get done. ADL has testified before Congress 9 times in the last 7 months. It's been really exhausting for the Washington office staff, but also really great, I guess. We're testifying this afternoon on hate groups in the military. Every one of those testimonies is on our website. And you can download, take it, don't even bother with the whole plagiarism concept. Take the language, make it your own, adapt it for your own purposes. It's on our website. You will be lobbying, some of you, on the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. It's all about white supremacy and making our government take that threat more seriously. Resource to the threat, that's what the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act is. I also want to elevate the No Ban Act. The No Ban Act is coming before the House Judiciary Committee tomorrow. There's an excellent chance in the next 3 weeks it'll be voted on in the full House. The No Ban Act would repeal the Trump discriminatory travel ban against Muslims and now apparently people from Africa, black people, and that needs to be repealed. The No Ban Act will do that. The Jewish community, led by Hayes, has done extraordinary work on immigration issues, on refugee issues, on asylum issues, and we should be able to get the No Ban Act passed. And finally, we should give kudos to JFNA, to Hadassah, to JCPA on the passage of the Never Again Education Act, the Holocaust Education Act, the Federal Holocaust Education Act in Congress. It passed 393 to 5. And now there's $2 million, if we can get it passed in the Senate, and appropriations for it to the Holocaust Museum to spark education and training. This is the time to pass Holocaust education mandates in every one of your states. There are 11 states that have these laws. Those states are California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, and Rhode Island. Every other state, congratulations, you guys, but every other state should have it, and this is the time to pass it as liberators, survivors, and witnesses still walk among us. Let's get that done. And finally, let me just say, working on legislation, before turning it over to Mike and Rob, establishes or cements relationships in our communities. It builds community, it advances community, and it can make a difference in the fight against anti-Semitism and hate.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Salamon with ADL as well, and I get to talk today about an emerging issue in the realm of combating anti-Semitism and hate, which is the online aspect of it. And ADL recently made the decision to make online safety a signature issue for the organization, alongside all of our longstanding work against anti-Semitism and hate crimes. And one reason for that is that online hate particularly affects marginalized communities. The rhetoric and tactics that are employed in online hatred are often rooted in white supremacy, misogyny, and anti-Semitism. And the online world is just a faster and more connected extension of the physical world. It's not a separate place where actions don't have consequences. And to demonstrate that, just quick show of hands, who uses the internet as part of their daily life? Who uses social media for work? Most people here. So as you can see, the common response that sometimes people hear when they're harassed or a victim of hate online is, well, just log off. Just turn it off. That's simply not feasible in the modern world. And just as we don't ask people to check their rights when they walk out the front door, they should not have to check their rights when they log online. So the first thing to know is how pervasive online hate and harassment are. About a year ago, ADL released a survey of online hate and harassment in the US that found that over half of American adults, 57%, experienced some type of online hate or harassment in the 2018 calendar year. And it's a problem that is particularly acute in the world of online gaming, which you may think, oh, gaming, video games, what's the big deal? The gaming industry last year made more money than the film industry and the music industry combined. It is a huge forum with millions of people who are dedicated gamers, including a lot of young people and young adults. And 53% of online gamers who experienced harassment believe they were targeted because of their race or ethnicity, their religion, their ability, their gender, or their sexual orientation. Basically, it is a place where white supremacists are using as a testing ground to feel out their messages, to recruit new people, and to harass people in a way where there's not a lot of accountability. So some terms that if you haven't heard, I would love if you could become a little familiar with, because you're going to be hearing more. This is an emerging field. So one is cyber harassment. And that is basically when someone engages in electronic communication that harasses or torments or threatens a specific target. And it can be both be an individual act or an umbrella term for a lot of the different stuff that I'll talk about later. Another is cyber stalking. So that's a pattern of online activity amounting to targeting a particular person, which causes that person to fear for their safety. A persistent, repeated, focused on an individual. Another one is doxing. Anyone familiar with the term doxing? comes from the word documents, and it's basically the internet-based practice of researching and broadcasting personal or identifying information. So that could be something like finding somebody's home address, a picture of their home from Google Images. This is publicly available stuff, but it's deployed in such a way to threaten that person, to make them feel intimidated and to make them change their behavior. Another one is, this one's a mouthful, non-consensual distribution of intimate imagery, which more colloquially known as revenge porn or non-consensual pornography. That's basically taking intimate images of a person and putting it online without their consent, again, in order to intimidate them, to harass them, to get them to change their behavior. And then finally is swatting. Anyone familiar with the term swatting? So that is basically falsely reporting an emergency at someone's house, with the goal being that a police unit, usually a SWAT team, is deployed. So this would be a thing where you call 911 and you say, there's been a murder, send the police immediately. Police do what they do, they respond in force. Sometimes they'll kick in the front door, break a window, and they find somebody sitting on their couch who is now scared out of their wits. And the goal, again, intimidation, harassment. And what ADL did, we looked at all the laws that cover these issues around the country, and we found that there's tremendous gaps in the law that limit people's recourse when they face these types of awful behavior online. What we want to do is extend protections for targets where the online considerations or cyber components are lacking. Basically, the type of behavior, these types of behavior, if you were to do it to somebody face-to-face, in person, there's a lot of legal recourse to support you and to protect you. But if this happens online, depending on where you are, you might have no recourse. This person may just completely get away with it scot-free. And as we demonstrated with the show of hands, the online and the offline world are merging more and more. So that disparity just cannot continue on. So a very encouraging sign is that we did a survey and we asked people if they supported the proactive changes that ADL is advocating for, which is strengthening laws to hold perpetrators accountable, strengthening platform laws and policies, and then increasing police training to investigate and prosecute these crimes. And every one of those changes was extremely popular, regardless if somebody was a victim of harassment or not, regardless of if they were conservative, progressive, somewhere in between. This is popular across the board. So we've identified the problem, we've confirmed that people want changes, and now as part of this Backspade Haste initiative that I mentioned, it's trying to get lawmakers' attention around the country to reach out to them to make sure they're paying attention to this issue and spurring them to action to better protect victims of this awful and emerging field.
I think we've said it all. So segueing into the nonprofit security grant program, I looked back into my files and I found the oldest record of our advocacy on this program, which was 90 days after 9/11, when the Senate held, I think up until this year, the only hearing. Then it was the Government Affairs Committee, now it's the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. And the Washington office of JFNA submitted a statement for the record for the first time raising the issue of Jewish communal faith-based concern in the aftermath of 9/11, setting the case about the issues that, about the need for us to be better prepared in terms of emergency preparedness training, in terms of creating physical safeguards for our soft institutions across the board. And when I pulled this document up just yesterday, it reads as if I wrote it this week and not 19 years ago. In 2004, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program received its first appropriation. And since then, we've secured over $400 million which provides for the physical security of at-risk nonprofit, faith-based communal organizations, as well as supporting related preparedness training, planning, exercises, and now the contracting of security personnel and whatnot. In terms of our relationship to ADL's fantastic work in terms of us trying to capture what the issue is, we've been relying on their research and their reports since the beginning, and it's great to have them on board as a significant partner this year, particularly as the issue of faith-based security has risen to the top of many committees and the number of hearings that are happening It's really great to watch ADL out there with us speaking in support of this program. In terms of your purpose here in Washington and your time for advocacy, you came right as yesterday the President's budget was released, and I just want to provide a quick parenthetical. The fact that the budget zeroed out funding for nonprofit security is nothing new. It is nothing to be alarmed about. It is part of the regular appropriation process. My perspective on the budget is it's just an opportunity as a courtesy of the administration to share with Congress its priorities as it fits in within the budget limits that they set for themselves. For example, while our funding was zeroed out, so were 16 other grant programs of the Department of Homeland Security. Only 5 were actually funded in the President's budget. So with that, though, Congress is now pivoting significantly to appropriations work for FY21, and as we've done every year, both JFNA and with CRCs and Federation Government Affairs professionals and other partners, we reach out to pretty much every office in the House and the Senate. We make our case about what the security concerns are, and we seek the appropriations, the maximum appropriations that we can secure in any given year. I can tell you that there's been great focus, particularly this year, on what are the gaps in the funding levels and the requests that have been submitted over the course of the last 16 appropriation cycles. And I can tell you that there have been, to date, just over $300 million in funding that have supported just over 3,800 grant awards, but there were 11,000 requests totaling over $900 million. So the gap in funding for resources has been significant, and we know in the current climate that the demand on these resources are going to increase exponentially. So this year for FY21, we're seeking a fourfold increase in appropriation for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. So where we thought in this current fiscal year at $90 million, that was an incredible result, and it really was, it's still insufficient. And as Congressman Peter King had stated at a recent hearing, and the Congressman is the ranking member of the House Homeland Security Emergency Preparedness Subcommittee, said enough is enough. We no longer can look at security as a budget item, but as a life and death issue, and we really need to put the resources in the programs to help communities deter, detect, mitigate, recover from these types of threats. So as you go up on the Hill today, or when you go back and you coalesce as grassroots and reach out to your members locally, I could tell you that in the next couple weeks, working with our champions, there will be House and Senate Dear Colleague funding request letters to appropriators that will, bipartisan, requests that will seek a quadrupling of the funding, and we hope that you'll reach out to your delegations and ask them to sign on to those letters. And we're happy to help you with that type of outreach, and I'll certainly be here after this program to talk one-on-one with any communities that are interested.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael, Mike, and Rob.